Hi class, this is the beginning of the protein synthesis notes video. For this particular assignment, you're going to be filling in this template that's found in your Google Classroom assignments, and it looks a little wonky on my iPad here, but it's because I'm on a different kind of a device. So basically, you're going to follow along with the video that I'm creating right now, and you're going to fill in the blanks, and then that's what you're going to turn in for your assignment. So what I want to do now is move over to the notes themselves, and we'll talk about them. There's also a few videos that I have embedded as well that we're going to take a look at. So the gist of this notes, the whole purpose of it is to talk about what proteins do, just kind of in general. So what are the functions of proteins, and how do they come about, and how do they affect organisms? How do they make organisms function correctly? So that's kind of the gist of what the notes are about today. So you notice on your template that I have things broken down into topics. So here's topic 1, looking at protein function. So some background knowledge, we know that all cells contain DNA. That's what defines a cell. A cell is that it contains DNA, or at least at one time it contained DNA. So there are some cells, for example, like red blood cells, that were born, so to speak, with DNA, with a nucleus. And then as they produce protein, like in the case of red blood cells, it's called hemoglobin. It produces so much hemoglobin to carry oxygen that it actually squishes and kills the nucleus. So that an adult red blood cell doesn't contain DNA, but as long as it did at one time, it's classified as a cell. So cells contain DNA. DNA is found, often in the nucleus of a cell if it's an advanced cell. If it's a primitive cell, such as a bacterial cell or a prokaryotic cell like that, then it may be floating around in the cytoplasm. But we know that DNA, regardless of where it's located, contains regions that are called genes. And these genes are just like sequences of bases that contain the code to code for a protein. And then these proteins do the work of the cells in order to make the cells have their specialized functions. And then, of course, cells work together to make an entire organism with its specialized function. So the first video I want to show you is going to talk about the functions of proteins as well as a little bit about the structure. So I'm going to go ahead and show the video now. Pull it up here, rewind it. Then you take notes from it and we'll talk about it after.
Proteins play countless roles throughout the biological world, from catalyzing chemical reactions to building the structures of all living things. Despite this wide range of functions, all proteins are made out of the same 20 building blocks, called amino acids. The way these 20 amino acids are arranged dictates the folding of the protein into its unique final shape and its function. Amino acids are made of carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and sulfur atoms. These atoms form an amino group, a carboxyl group, and a side chain attached to a central carbon atom. The side chain is the only part that varies from amino acid to amino acid and determines its property. Hydrophobic amino acids, such as leucine and isoleucine, have carbon-rich side chains, which don't interact well with water. Hydrophilic amino acids, such as serine or threonine, interact well with water. Charged amino acids like glutamic acid or arginine interact with oppositely charged amino acids or with water. The primary structure of the protein is the linear sequence of amino acids as encoded by DNA. The amino acids are joined by peptide bonds, which link an amino group and a carboxyl group. A water molecule is released each time a bond is formed. Specific amino acid sequences give proteins their distinct shapes and chemical characteristics. These protein chains often fold into two types of secondary structures stabilized by hydrogen bonds. A protein chain can fold into a rigid alpha helix, forming regular patterns of hydrogen bonds between the backbone atoms of nearby amino acids. Backbone atoms of the chain can interact side by side to form beta sheets. Many proteins fold into a compact globular shape, with hydrophobic side chains sheltered inside away from the surrounding water. The functions of many proteins rely on this folded structure. For instance, hemoglobin forms a pocket to hold heme, a small molecule with an iron atom in the center that binds oxygen. Two or more polypeptide chains can come together to form one functional molecule with several subunits. The four subunits of hemoglobin cooperate so that the complex can pick up more oxygen in the lungs and release it in the body. Many proteins rely on the ability to recognize the shape of specific molecules in order to function correctly. The flexible arms of antibodies protect the body from disease by recognizing and binding to foreign molecules, and thus preventing the viral RNA or DNA to enter the cell. Collagen forms a strong triple helix that is used throughout the body for structural support. The calcium pump moves ions across cell membranes, allowing the synchronized contraction of muscle cells. The hormone insulin is a small, stable protein that can easily maintain its shape while traveling through the blood to regulate blood sugar level. Alpha amylase is an enzyme with a catalytic site that begins the breakdown of carbohydrates in our saliva. Ferritin forms a hollow shell that stores iron from our food. Learn more about the functions and 3D structures of nucleic acids, proteins, and molecules.
Okay, so that's the video. You can see that first video, let me go back to the notes here. That first video give you some information about some functions that the proteins have in the body, as well as a little bit about its protein structure. We're going to talk more about protein structure another time. So you can see that it has a very complex structure. The next topic in the notes is DNA structure. So we've talked a little bit about this already. So DNA is made of 3 different parts. We know that the side parts of DNA, so the pink in this picture here, alternate between phosphate and deoxyribose sugar, phosphate, deoxyribose, phosphate, deoxyribose. And then the rungs of this twisted rope ladder are the base pairs. So remember, adenine pairs with thymine and guanine always pairs with cytosine. And it does so because of the way the molecules interact with each other. So it's impossible for them to pair up with anything other than their partner because of the way the molecules are. Okay, third topic, protein synthesis. We've talked about this in general as well. So we know that proteins are made, that the code is contained in DNA, which is in the nucleus in a complex cell, or in the middle of the cytoplasm in a primitive cell, and that these pieces of DNA have regions that have the codes for proteins. So these regions are called genes. And then we know that messenger RNA makes a copy of the gene and then takes the copy to the ribosome, and that's where the proteins are actually manufactured. That transfer RNA comes in and brings the amino acids. And transfer RNA knows what to bring in because messenger RNA has the correct code. So it only can follow the code in order to bring the correct amino acids to make that protein, to make that primary structure that they talked about in the video that we'll talk more about in another day as well. So the next thing I want to talk about is just show a video, another video. So it's the second video that's just doing an overview of the process of protein synthesis that we're still going to continue to talk about in class. Okay, so the second video, it's right here. Oops, don't want to skip to the end. There we go.
Here is a cell, the basic unit of all living tissue. In most human cells, there is a structure called the nucleus. The nucleus contains the genome. In humans, the genome is split between 23 pairs of chromosomes. Each chromosome contains a long strand of DNA, tightly packaged around proteins called histones. Within the DNA are sections called genes. These genes contain the instructions for making proteins. When a gene is switched on, an enzyme called RNA polymerase attaches to the start of the gene. It moves along the DNA, making a strand of messenger RNA out of free bases in the nucleus. The DNA code determines the order in which the free bases are added to the messenger RNA. This process is called transcription. Before the messenger RNA can be used as a template for the production of proteins, it needs to be processed. This involves removing and adding sections of RNA. The messenger RNA then moves out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm. Protein factories in the cytoplasm, called ribosomes, bind to the messenger RNA. The ribosome reads the code in the messenger RNA to produce a chain made up of amino acids. There are 20 different types of amino acid. Transfer RNA molecules carry the amino acids to the ribosome. The messenger RNA is read 3 bases at a time. As each triplet is read, a transfer RNA delivers the corresponding amino acid. This is added to a growing chain of amino acids. Once the last amino acid has been added, the chain folds into a complex 3D shape to form the protein.
No, I don't want you to play. Don't play. Okay. So going back to the notes again. So that video summarized basically what's happening during protein synthesis. So we know that it has 2 phases, transcription and translation, where it makes messenger RNA, and then it makes transfer RNA, brings like amino acids to form an amino acid chain. We're going to talk in more depth about those 2 processes in the future as well. Last topic that I want to talk about today is essential functions of life. So the essential functions of life are, it's kind of like a checklist of things that living cells must carry out. If they don't meet all of these checklist items, then they're not considered to be alive. And in this particular graphic, you can see that there's 7 different essential functions of life. So 7 things that a living thing must do to be qualified as alive. It depends on the list. So some people break things up a little bit further than others. But these are the things that are required in order to be alive. So it has to be able to take in, for nutrition, it has to be able to take in food and get nutrients out of it. It has to be able to break down food products as well as use them as an energy source in metabolism. It has to be able to grow larger in size. It has to be able to respond to a stimulus in its environment. It excretes waste. And homeostasis, it helps maintain a kind of a constant equilibrium inside of the cell. And it must be able to reproduce. So there's a lot of things, like if you're thinking about like a flame, for example, there's a lot of things that a flame does. But if the flame doesn't do all of these things, then it's not considered to be alive. Same thing like with a virus. You're thinking about the COVID-19 virus. A COVID-19, any virus is not considered to be alive. It meets a lot of these things, but it doesn't meet all of them. So for example, a virus doesn't go through metabolism. What it does is it hijacks a cell. It will attach to one of your cells. It'll inject its genetic material. In the case of COVID-19, the genetic material is RNA. It'll basically hijack your cell, and it'll have your cell make copies of its own virus because it injected the genetic material into your own nucleus. So it doesn't go through metabolism on its own. It relies on a cell to do that for it. Same thing with reproduction. It doesn't reproduce on its own. It has to hijack a cell to do that. So it kind of acts like a parasite, so to speak. But even parasites are considered to be alive. So viruses are not considered to be alive because they don't meet all of these functions of life. So for now, you're just kind of listing these things that are required for life. And then the last part of it, I'm asking you just to kind of summarize your notes. These are kind of the key points that I want you to get out of these notes. All cells contain DNA. DNA has sections of it, of its bases that are called genes. These genes code for proteins, and then these proteins help cells carry out their specialized functions and tissues. Okay, that's all. Have a good one. Bye.